I will say welcome to today's Thrive in Business learning session about cybersecurity. We're going to protect our business and stay calm. Um, we talk about, this balance, especially right now in the current political climate, about being out and proud versus also, protecting ourselves. And I'm really excited to hear from Charlie today about this topic. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Charlie, but I'm also going to tell everybody that you are a longtime ORPID volunteer, the new chair of our Membership Engagement and Outreach Committee, and I adore you as a person and appreciate your being here.
Aw, thank
Thank
you,
you so much.
Janine.
You're welcome.
Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the session. I really appreciate it. Um, so to introduce myself, my name is Charlie Hersman. I recently founded Break Free Technology Consulting. I have 20 years of IT support experience in government and business organizations. I have added a quote. The thing that has really carried me through everything I do is a strong sense of passion and remembering the humanity that comes with everything that we do. Cybersecurity is all about humanity, and if we lose touch with that, um, we end up doing what I've seen a lot of technology companies do, putting the technology first and forgetting the individual. So I'm super thrilled to be here. Super thrilled, as Janine said, to step up and take a little more active role in ORPIB. And let's go ahead and get into it. So everybody is here to to talk about the one thing that could happen that nobody wants to have happen, and that uh, is a little bit of a buzzword, a little bit of a fear word, and that is a breach. Um, Nobody wants a breach. Nobody wants to hear that they've been breached. Um, it's very often used as leverage to sell products. The fear that it invokes is a very strong selling tool. I will say that it's not a very great relationship tool. And so, what I want to do in this session is really be very matter of fact about what a breach is and what we're going to do to kind of take some of that fear and anxiety out of it. So, of all the things that a breach is, the most important thing I think is what my friend Evan at Person Centered Tech said: a breach is a professional milestone. It is not a source of shame. It will happen. If you are in business long enough, you will have a breach of some sort. Um, so, kind of starting to help bring down that anxiety. It's very common. I know we see it in the news a lot. Very, very high visibility breaches. These things happen. We're gonna step into the difference between a breach and an incident. You'll hear kind of both of these interchangeably. A breach is a confirmed disclosure of data to an unauthorized party. An incident is a thing that happens that could lead to that. Um, Not super critical for what we're talking about today, but it kind of helps us see if we address potential incidents, we're going to help keep ourselves from getting into breach territory. So, various incident or breach sources. There's three major ones. There's an external intentional. We'll say that pretty much any external incident can be an intentional one. This could be somebody just looking to see if you have a vulnerability, or it could be somebody looking to see if you have a vulnerability so that they can exploit it, but it's typically intentional. It's not always active. This could just be somebody scanning the internet. There's also internal intentional as well. This is an employee, a contractor, a vendor that you work with for whatever reason, they've decided that they want to cause harm. The reality is that most of us are going to see this third area, internal unintentional. This is somebody unintentionally causing an incident that could potentially lead to a breach. They've clicked on a link that they got in a webmail. They've responded to something on social media that they thought was legit or a text. Most of us are going to fall in this internal unintentional. And the good news about that is that's controllable, it's educatable, and there are certain things that we can put into place to help prevent that. So before I get into it too far, I do want to say that at the end of this, I'm going to have some time for questions, and I'm also going to mention some resources. Everybody's going to get that list of resources. I'll work with Janine to make sure that everybody gets that information. I love when I see people taking notes. I am more than happy to also follow up with you, have conversations with you. But there are some pretty nifty tools that I pulled this from that I want to make sure you have that you can share with your team, or if you're a solopreneur, you can start working your way through. Um, I did say that I have questions available at the end. If you have questions going through this, please, throw something in chat, throw up a hand, whatever. We have plenty of time. We'll answer questions. I'm sorry, I moved to Canva, so I keep hitting the wrong button. There we go. So this is the best time to start doing this work. Does anybody here have more than, I would say, 5 employees? You can just wave your hand, throw up an emoji, whatever. My experience with ORPIB is that a lot of us are solopreneurs. We're very small organizations. A lot of us who are active in the Thrive in Business series. And getting getting big, getting established, and then starting to have these conversations is very, very, very difficult. Now is the perfect time to start this checklist because you've set into place how you're going to bring people on, how you're going to train them, what to look to. And as someone who is experienced watching people try to put various controls in place after they have 20, 30, 40, 50 staff, it is so much harder. So starting with it being, yes, it's simpler when you have fewer people, you have smaller technology, you might be 100% remote, you might not have an in-person office. It makes it so much easier to scale that up as you grow. If you don't plan on growing and you just want to stay a solopreneur, that's okay. There are some super basic things you can do to protect yourself as a solopreneur and also vet those vendors and resources that you're working with. So we're going to start thinking about assets. What do you have and need to do business? So these would be things like, well, I need a way for people to reach out to me. So I probably need email. I might have a website. I have software that I need to use. I have applications that I use. Maybe I use QuickBooks. Um, so just thinking about what are those assets that we have, and that's going to be the basis of our checklist. So walking through data, what information do you have and where does it live? For the most part, unless we are looking at a very targeted attack that is just trying to take down your organization, those are rare. They do happen. I will say that they happen, as Janine mentioned earlier in the session, they do tend to happen more often with organizations that are very vocal about a passionate group. So queer businesses, nonprofits, It is a thing that happens where somebody will reach out and try to breach based on what you stand for. The bulk of breaches, though, are data. They're looking for client information, they're looking for credit card numbers, they're looking for controlled blueprints. If you're in a manufacturing industry, anything like that. So sit down and think about what information do you have and where does it live? Do you have personal identifying information? And then do you have hardware? Do you have an office network? A lot of us might not. A lot of us might just be working from home. We're not dealing with an office network. Um, we might still have technology, though. We have computers, we have smart devices. Looking at things like Nest, Google Home. How are those communicating with the internet? Software. What tools do you use? Cloud applications, downloaded software, mobile apps. Everybody has something, even if we are remote only. Um, Everybody has something that they are using to make their lives easier. In many cases, they're using that to support their job. And then people, especially as a small business, we might see that we rely less on employees and more on contractors or vendors. What if I am outsourcing all of my bookkeeping to a financial vendor? Um, that's still an asset. I still need to follow that path and ask certain questions. So this step now is really just sitting down, thinking about what you have. What is everything that you use, that you come in contact to do your work? We're not going to do this in this session. I want to make sure that we get through to questions, but book some time, grab a notepad, a computer, however you make notes. Sit down and think about everything that you need to do your job and just write it down. You're not going to troubleshoot. You're not going to decide, do I need this or don't I need it? You're just documenting. I will say that this is a good time to write down anything you think you are going to need in the next 6 months to 12 months. If you think you're going to onboard some new technology or you're going to need a new resource, go ahead and write it down so that you're you're taking that into consideration. I will say, if you're anything like me, I want to reiterate you're not problem solving this step because I will start to write things down and then I will get into my head about, well, do I need that? What if I upgraded that? Try not to do that. Try to just document it, write it out. We'll get to those steps later. So the next thing we're going to look at is access. So you've documented everything that you have and that you need to do your job. And now we're going to look at who interacts with that and how do they interact with it. So again, because we said for the most part, what is interesting to people is data. This can be data on how you're set up. This can be actual personal identification. Um, this can be, you know, payment processing, credit card information. Where does that data live? So I have physical. That's still a thing. You can have an external drive plugged into your computer. You can have a flash drive. You could literally have a file cabinet with papers. Um, is it on a network? Is there a server that you have as an in-office setup? We talked a little bit about Internet of Things, which is devices like Alexa, Google Home, Ring, smart devices. Um, this is really common with security systems. If you have a physical office or you have a home office, you might have a camera system. Where is that video stored? Online. A lot more organizations are doing online only, where they're using online file storage. Where do those files exist? How are they passed back and forth? Um, Are you using email? How is that data moving? And then remote, do you have any devices in a different office that you are remoting into? So this difference being this isn't just sitting online for everybody who has credentials to log into. This is specifically an office that you're remoting into or that one of your staff is remoting into that is in another location. So as we're walking through access, we're thinking about who needs to have access, how are they getting access, when are they getting access, and where are they getting it from? So who can be employees, contractors, vendors, yourself, tech support. One that we see really common is a utility account. So this might not necessarily be a shared account, but it might be an account that no person uses. This is really common, say if you have QuickBooks and it needs to integrate with one of your systems, you might use an account that somebody uses, or you might have an account that is just out there for people to connect to. Those are really important accounts because they're often overlooked. If I'm not logging into a utility account every day, I'm not necessarily seeing that my password has changed or that I'm seeing um, some bizarre behavior. And that's way more consistently caught if it's active credentials that are an employee's credentials where they're logging in and getting into it every day. Most of us are super familiar with password login. PIN is really common for, um, let's see, Microsoft tries to have you use PIN sometimes when logging into laptops. PIN is really common. I think you mostly see that with mobile devices where you're punching in a code versus logging in with a password. Um, Biometric, we're starting to see more as scanners get more effective. We're seeing more thumbprint logins on mobile devices. And passphrase is very similar to a password. That's something that we see kind of interchangeably. It really is just a way to make a longer, more complex password for the purpose of what we're talking about. When is really important. Is this an account where it's an employee and they're going to need that regular ongoing connection? And when I'm referencing employees, I am saying you're an employee. Even if you're a solopreneur, count yourself as an employee for the sake of this conversation. That needs to be ongoing. It needs to be persistent. You always need to be able to log into your systems. A vendor might not always need to be able to log in. Maybe they only need to log into their vendor account once a month. Bookkeeping, things where maybe you might not see a need for that person to be logging in at odd times, which gets us into time bound, which is does this account need to be logging in on the weekend? Will logging in on the weekend raise a flag? Or logging in over the holidays. Holidays are a really popular time for us to see breaches because we have more people away, fewer people are trying to log into their accounts, so they're less likely to see malicious behavior happening. And again, we're not at this point. We're starting to build what does this access need to look like. We're still not quite into the okay, now let's make a change on something. Where, so this is both more and more common and also really helpful if we are looking to cut down breaches. A lot of breaches that we will see, especially with queer organizations, are going to be not necessarily originate from foreign entities, but a lot of organizations that are trying to attack or persons that are trying to attack a smaller organization are using, I apologize, I can't think of the word, mercenaries. So they will actually hire groups of people who will go after a target, um, regardless of who it is. They just don't care. Send the money, they'll go after the target. Cutting down on how many countries can access your systems and your devices, if you have that ability, can be really useful. The flip side of that being, more and more of us, as we have a global workforce, more and more of us are collaborating with foreign entities. So that's something to think about. Is there any situation where I would need somebody to be able to remote in from outside? Would I ever need somebody to connect from outside the US? It's pretty uncommon to break it down by state. It's not it's not undoable, but that's pretty complicated. So usually when I say the US specifically, it really just is because typically country blocking is by country. And if you want to get into state blocking, there's a whole other level of complexity there. That was a whole bunch of information. And so I kind of want to pause there and see if anybody has any questions. Right now, all we've done is we've started bringing things together. We're pulling information together. We're starting to kind of make decisions on it. I want to pause real quick, though, before we get into our third A, which is actions, and give people a chance to ask any questions or any clarification that they need. All right. So this is where we're going to end up spending most of our time today, because a lot of what we've just talked through really is what you want to do with your business, what you need to do with your business. A lot of that's homework. A lot of it is, let me sit down with pad and paper, or let me sit down on a computer, whatever helps me get my thoughts out. Now we're going to talk about what we need to do with this information that we've documented in steps 1 and 2. So I've broken down cybersecurity into 3 different categories. And the reason I've done this is if you talk to anybody who works in security, um, versus anybody who works in HR, uh, I don't know that there are 2 groups that you could have headbutt as hard. Security and usability are always going to be this give and take. We can always be more secure, but the more secure we are, the less usable technology is. The most secure technology is offline, behind locked doors. It That's not super usable. It's not super accessible. Um, so we have levels, and it brings to mind this terrible thing that I was taught very early on, very near the beginning of my 20 years of experience. Was we had an FBI trainer come in, and when they were doing an ethical hacking course, and they made that the joke around, I don't have to, if 2 people are running from a bear, I don't have to be faster than the bear. It's a horrible example. If you know of a better example for me to use, please let me know, because I would love to come up with a different example. Um, but that does bring to mind the idea that if you are a smaller target, if you have certain protections in place, it makes your life easier. Very, very often, um, casual, a lot of attacks are automated. They're just scripts scouring the internet. Um, If you're dealing with ransomware that's just automated, you don't talk to somebody until an attack has taken place. A lot of attacks are very low effort. If you are personally targeted because of who you are, that is a different level. And that's something that you will want to kind of figure out what your needs are in steps 1 and 2. That said, there is a must do if you are in any sort of work that requires you to have compliance, a certain level of compliance. The most common one I think everybody knows about is HIPAA. HIPAA is not just a we trained our people. There is a technical capacity to HIPAA. You must be technically HIPAA compliant as well. Um, Everything that I've talked to about all the HIPAA experts have told me, and really this is the case for compliance as a whole, it is reasonable effort. So there's no end to security. Like I said, you can always be more secure, but if you're going and arguing a case on HIPAA compliance, the question is, did you make a reasonable effort to be compliant? And then you bring your tools that you have in place showing, yeah, here's all the efforts that I made to be compliant. Um, I would say if you are doing anything that requires you to, PCI is another one for payment processing. If you are doing anything that requires a certain compliance, you have to start there. You don't really have the ability to do a simpler version. But if you focus on that compliance, government compliances do tend to be far more aggressive than your regular best practice. If you start there, you're going to be fine. Start with the compliance that you're required. If you are not required to hold any certain compliance and you're looking at just how to shore yourself up, I would start next with the cybersecurity insurance requirements. So more and more business insurance policies have a cybersecurity section. I would say if your business insurance does not, I would not work with them. I would find somebody who knows what cybersecurity insurance is, um, and knows how to write policies to protect you. They should have a very, very good form. Um, one of the more aggressive ones that I saw was a 3-page list of questions. So when in doubt, reach out to your insurance organization and see what their checklist is for cybersecurity. And if nothing else, you've started that conversation with them. Let them go look at it, get back to you. And then third, I have what you could do. So absent of either of these, there are so many compliance frameworks out there. Um, SOC 1 and SOC 2 are a couple versions of it. This is where I would say work with a vendor, work with an expert to talk about your business, what data you handle, what you need to be secure, and pick a compliance framework. We're going to go into, I'm going to provide some resources for some of these compliance frameworks for step 3, so that you can actually look through and go through yourself. I keep hitting the wrong button. Sorry. I work in tech. I should know how to run Canva. So your action list is going to look something similar to this. Um, I've broken it down into systems, people, and data. Uh, the reality is it's not always that clean. It's much like the whole person, the whole organization. I've tried to break it down for simplicity's sake, but you're going to have some overlap. So for systems, we're looking at antivirus, software updates, device management. Let's touch on device management real quick. That's something to think about if I'm bringing on employees or if it's just me. Am I going to use a computer that I also do that I also perform personal behaviors on, or am I going to let employees bring their own devices? And bring their own device includes using their cell phone for for multi-factor authentication. Um, are they only going to be able to use certain technologies? This is Now is the time. If you are thinking about bringing on employees, now is the time to think about how you want to do this. Pros and cons to BYOD. It's cheaper. It's also harder to control a device that isn't yours. That's not to say it's not possible. There are plenty of ways to have your data locked behind a login. And so that user has to log in to access that data. And when they no longer have access, that data is removed. Endpoint protection. So for the longest time, we were telling people, make sure you have antivirus. We're actually seeing that that isn't enough anymore. There are plenty of products out there that also provide endpoint protection. I would say start using that as your key phrase if you are looking for a solid product. If you want to reach out to me personally and ask me who I recommend, I'm more than happy to tell you what I've interacted with. Nobody pays me for my advice when it comes to their product. If anybody wants to pay me for their advice when it comes to my advice when it comes to their product, let me know. But endpoint protection, now we're looking at, is this computer doing the things I would expect it to do in its normal day-to-day activities? So this is beyond antivirus, beyond, oh, there's a malicious file. Is this computer behaving in a way that I think might be risky? And there are products that you can purchase to install on computers very reasonably priced that provide that extra level of endpoint protection. A really good example of that would be I'm HR and I'm hiring somebody, and somebody sends me their resume. We are actively seeing this in the cybersecurity world where HR is really being hammered with infected PDFs and infected files because I'm hiring, I've got a posting. This is absolutely data I expect to see. It's in a form I expect to see, so I open it up. There's no reason for that PDF to go try to run an executable on your computer. So endpoint protection will know that. Will see, hey, this is your lane. Why are you over here? And will help prevent that activity. Website protection, a lot of us are familiar with seeing the HTTPS, which shows that there is an SSL certificate installed, making sure that you have that in place. Anymore, a lot of your web providers, that is built in, an SSL certificate is built in. It's very easy to click through and say, yes, I want this, whatever your SSL is that you provide. I would say make sure that your vendor is well known when doing that. And then email protection. This gets a little more into the nitty gritty of working with somebody. There are ways that you can set up your email so that the server knows it came from your domain. Um, this would be one where I would really say sit down with a professional and talk about that. But a lot of this is very entry level, we can start here, we can get more complex down the road. For people, both the most time consuming and also the most approachable section is people. Anti-phishing awareness, doing training, acceptable use policies, um, having a policy. I just did a series last week on my social media on drafting an acceptable use policy. Um, how are you engaging with our information? How are you expected to engage with our information? I want to point out that it's very much okay if you have volunteers and you are a nonprofit, please still have them fill out an acceptable use policy. That is completely okay to ask people to behave a certain way when engaging with your data. Employee onboarding and offboarding, knowing how to bring somebody on, but also how to step that back if you let them go. How do I lock down their access? How do I make sure that they haven't installed files locally? Best practice training. I see tons of anti-phishing awareness, and I appreciate that. But there's so much importance on best practice and security awareness as a whole. If I text you and I say, hey, go to Best Buy, get me a whole bunch um of Apple cards, Apple Store cards. Have my people been trained in a way that they know what looks fishy and not the pH? Um, Least privilege access. Think about what is the least amount of access that this person needs to do their job. I know the default is just give them credentials, whatever. I can't be bothered. Don't bug me with follow-up questions. I'm busy. Um, Here, just have this. I know this account will give you all the access. Um, it's really tempting to do that. Avoid that. Spend a little bit of time looking at what is the least amount of access this person needs to do their work. And that's you too, as a solopreneur. Have an admin account that has admin credentials and don't use it. I would say log into it every once in a while, make sure nothing looks fishy. But if you are doing your day-to-day work, most of the time you will not need admin access to, say, an email account or something like that to just email. Consider having yourself on a least privileged account. Tabletop exercises are really fun and sounds way more professional than they have to be. A tabletop exercise is literally just what would happen if we were breached. Let's talk about it. Make it a lunch, grab coffee, whatever. Sit down and talk through it because then you're going to see, excuse me, then you're going to see um, potentially areas that you can improve on or that you have questions. Ooh, I don't know. Would our cybersecurity insurance cover us having a third party come in and mitigate this? We should find out. That's really, really important. A tabletop exercise can be way more complex than that. For this purpose, though, it really is just a thought exercise. Walk through, start at worst case scenario, and walk your way back. Because the worst thing that could happen has already happened. Let the fear go, work your way back. Um, Data, we're looking at one of the best things you can do is turn on some form of multi-factor authentication. Now, I will say email and text are becoming less and less secure as a form of multi-factor authentication. I would recommend an authenticator app. Google's got one. Authy is a great one. Again, if you ever get to a point where you're like, oh, I wonder what a good product would be for this, and you want a recommendation, shoot me an email. I've got my contact info here later. I'm more than happy to tell you this is what I've used. There's no charge for that. Just me trying to keep everybody secure. Password management, same thing. There's some really great password managers out there. Some of them are easier to use than others. Some of them have better reputations than others. Get a really solid one, set it up so that you're creating unique passwords. Backups. Um, the insurance agent that I spoke with that is also was a client of mine way back in the day. Really wanted people to be aware, and this is true, Cloud Sync is not backup. Your files are not backed up because they're on Google Drive. I know, Janine. Here's why. Google Drive has a Google as an entity has no obligation to have more than one copy of your data. And two, what is the most convenient way for us to have file share? It's so that if I make a change to my file, it changes it in the cloud. Super easy. That way, if I've sent you the link to that, you see the changes that I've made. Now, the downside of that is if I get ransomware and my files get locked, what happens when that sync runs? It's going to lock all of my cloud files. So I've kind of dropped that down here in ransomware protection as well. There are products, again, shoot me a message if you want a recommendation. Although I will throw a Backblaze to the front for just simplicity and having some sort of a backup, and they do cloud backup. There are products to back up your data. So one of the biggest things that I think insurance companies have been seeing is that they're getting requests for payouts for data recovery, and their clients think they have backups, and what they have turned on is cloud sync. That's super, super important. Another big one is encrypted transfers of files. Don't email personally identifiable sorry, the cold meds are kicking in. Don't email PII, acronyms are easier, um, through regular unencrypted email. You will know if it's encrypted. There's a whole additional process that you have to go through to send encrypted email. I had a client who was breached. They had access to the CEO's email or the COO's email for 15 minutes. That is how long it took them to find the breach, tell us about it, and for us to lock them down. And they wanted to know if that was a breach that they had to do anything with. Well, 15 minutes is long enough to download your entire email inbox. And that is how I found out that they were passing, as a collections agency, they were passing financial data through Outlook, which is a huge no-no. At that point, I have to basically throw up my hands and say, you need to talk to a data lawyer because you're going to have to look at what you have to release to the public and all of that. I did some Googling. I showed them what kind of legal advice they were looking for, and they resolved it from there. Um, Disaster recovery. We kind of already touched on having backups. We're also looking at, physical disaster. We talked about physical files ages ago, making sure that you have things in place. Use your tabletop exercises. What would happen if the building that my computer is in burned down? All of this is try to step back from the anxiety that that question just brought up for me and be methodical about it. Well, I would be okay because we have the backups, or oh, we would need to have backups in place. Let's make sure we get that put into place. And very similar to ransomware protection. Do I have backups that are separated from the internet in a way that it would be another step, in a way that executables can't run on them? What do I have in place to make sure that I can get up tomorrow morning and do business same as usual? It doesn't have to be perfect. It could be I'm up tomorrow morning on my cell phone and I'm doing business from my smartphone because I don't have a computer and I'm waiting for insurance to go through so that I can get another one. But you can keep making money, business can flow. So at the end of the day, this is an incredibly simplified, and yes, you will get this file. This is an incredibly simplified checklist. Like I said, we're just starting out. Something is better than nothing. It's starting the conversation either with your team or in yourself. Um, our hardware is documented. We have a process for adding new hardware. Most people do not have access to add hardware. Figure out who your decision makers are going to be. All of our software is licensed. We have a process on vetting and adding new software. Most people do not have access to install software. Same thing. We know where our data is and who has access to it at all times. We protect sensitive data by using encryption products. We have full and incremental backups in place. Very much the way it sounds, a full backup is a full snapshot of all of your data, and incremental is what has changed since the last time backup ran. That is built into every backup product that I've run into. It's probably not something that you need to set up manually. Everyone has only as much access as they need to do their jobs. We have documented who gets what access. We use unique accounts. Nobody's sharing accounts, and unique passwords. They're not using passwords that they've got somewhere else. And we manage those accounts from a central location. That's going to be tricky. And that's something that you're going to want to establish before you start bringing people on or before you have more than, I would say, 5 employees. This is the time to figure that out, is how are you going to centrally manage their accounts? And what centrally managed means is, if you leave with my computer, I can still lock your access down. I don't need access to the computer that you are working on. I can do it from where I'm at because I have the credentials to log into that management. Tons of options to use that. Reach out to me if you need advice on that. We use multi-factor authentication, and we remove access in a timely manner. I love that people grow and they move on, remove their access. Don't leave it lingering around just because you feel it's rude to offboard them, or let their access go. It's okay. And scale down their access if they're staying on as a consultant and they don't need full employee access. Bring their level of access down. All hardware and software receives updates promptly and automatically. We have additional protections in place to prevent malware, ransomware, and attacks. We talked about that endpoint detection. We train our people on the proper ways of handling our data, how to recognize attacks on it, and how to report concerns. We review and retrain regularly. I almost put annually in here because really that's what it should be. Um, Except that teams are different sizes, and it's work with somebody to help you know what is the right method for your team, what is the right system for your team. We vet our vendors and are aware of the security measures they use. We have a process in place for adding new vendors. Most people do not have the ability to create a new relationship with a vendor. That should be very, very, very closely guarded. You do not want somebody who does not understand what access they are giving away to be giving away access to your system. We practice the worst case scenario and know what to do if we experience a breach. We have a cybersecurity insurance policy that covers mitigation appropriate to our size. So, a lot of things that people don't realize is that your cybersecurity insurance will also cover a third party coming in, or should cover a third party coming in and fixing it for you. It is not just downtime. It is not just what did we think our data was worth. It will bring in additional resources, additional help to come in and get you back to business as usual. Take advantage of that. I would also say, if you're going to talk to a cybersecurity insurance person, ask them how much the next policy up costs, because sometimes it's just a matter of like 20 bucks difference, but you get twice the coverage. So find a solid cybersecurity insurance, and most business insurance at this point, anybody who's established is working on these policies. If they don't have a policy at all, I would just avoid them. And kind of finally, this is a big list of resources. Everybody's going to get this list. Don't worry about copying this down. A lot of these just start walking you through. They are various levels of complexity. Some of them are, the CIS security controls self-assessment tool. There are 17 or 18 controls. They are pretty complex. CISA starter kit, great place to start. The GCA toolkit, honestly, I would probably recommend most people start here, especially if you are just launching your business. Um, all these are all free resources, and a lot of these are, for the most part, really set in that brand new solopreneur. We are just launching to, under 100 employees. So, with all of that said, I hope this time was useful. I want to stop because I went a little bit over my canon time that I had in my head, and make sure that people have time to ask any questions. Want to go back to anything, let me know. I'm here to help.
Carly, I have a question.
Yeah.
Um, As you know, I'm a fractional COO, so I don't have my own team, but I sit on the org chart for all my client
Hmm.
organizations. And usually when I join a company, the founder is really eager to just like start offloading all the things. So, and usually that access is by like a bunch of passwords just kind of being thrown at me. And it's always alarming to me how much
Yeah.
passwords are thrown around. Often there's a 2FA situation where like the founder no longer wants ownership of that because you usually can't get a hold of the founder because they're busy. So then someone who else on the team holds that, like it goes to their cell phone and then they leave and then we get locked out. I try using things like LastPass and then people still get the password and then they put it on their local computer and then it stays on their local computer.
Mhm.
um, it's a cluster. So what's your recommendation?
So part of that can be the expectation that's said of, hey, here's how I do things. Part of it might be, I don't want to use the word shame,
Hmm.
operational influence,
Yeah.
which is, hey, the best way for you to send this information to me is, here's the way that I've chosen. Um, I would say probably one of the earliest things to do would be reach out to the person who makes the financial decisions and see if you can get them on, especially as a fractional COO, where they might eventually bring on another COO. See if you can get them on a, this is your credential, this is your login, here is your, password management system. You have to be willing to pay for it, but this is how, as part of onboarding me, this is what you're going to need in place. So it would be things like, um, where you're going to need an acceptable use policy, or we're going to work towards that. You're going to need to send me credentials in one of these, self-approved. So you kind of get to set the parameters of that and say this is the non-owner led everything, or you get that office manager who's the center hub. This is the way that I do business. This is the products that I use. I'm happy to work with your financial person to set, to purchase that product and contribute to it as your product. Um, but this is how we need to do things moving forward.
So in the past, I have had someone else on my team who actually handled that. Like I'm not the tech person at all. And so I don't even know. Like if you were me and you were me as someone who doesn't know shit about tech, right? Put yourself in my head. Like what tool would you recommend? Like what would be that thing that I say, as you're onboarding me, this is what you need to purchase or download, or what is the system to use?
I would say if we're specifically using, and that part of that is having a conversation with a partner, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as that kind of fractional, and I function as this fractional CTO, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
finding that partner who can fill in that gap for you. Um, I really love Bitwarden as just a password manager. If they don't pay me, I like the product. It's a fantastic password manager, and I'm always going to look at something that can also be managed at an enterprise level. So we said that centralized control, that's what that enterprise system means. They can set up accounts, they can remove accounts, they can set up remove access. The way people behave on whether or not they're saving passwords, that's all an acceptable use policy. And
Yeah.
that's hard because there has to be discipline structure built in to this is how we're going to do things now.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Charlie.
And we can always follow up and chat.
I'm sure we will.
Corey, you were unmuted, and I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to address anything that you had.
Thank you. Yeah, I was curious, and sorry, I didn't realize I was still unmuted when my dog started barking. So I was just curious. I mean, we deal with cyber insurance because it's something we provide, but what sort of guidance do you have on what level to have? Because I know it starts like as low as 25 grand. Of course, you can go up to millions if needed. And of course, as an insurance agent, they only give us so much guidance as to what should we offer. So
It is so hard to answer. So I have gone to multiple agencies, and what I'm trying to do, and if anybody has a little bit of direct line to an underwriter, please, I will court them like nobody's business. No insurance agency that I have ever spoken to will let me directly talk to an underwriter. But the feedback that I have gotten is that it really is the underwriter's kind of call. It's their gut check. Um, Again, I would say this is going to be something where you look at the complexity of the organization and bring in a third party who says, worst case scenario, they're breached. Here are their systems. This isn't an easy question to answer, unfortunately. Here are
that's
their
what I that's what I
systems.
sort of figured.
Right. What would it cost to recover from this? Um, I've tried to get what are you checking off the list from insurance agencies and from underwriters? And there isn't one. Insurance agents would love there to be a list that says, hey, as an underwriter, this is everything we're checking off that you need to make sure you have. Um, I will say that the more that the company has done to harden their own security, the higher policy they can get. So with that company, I would start with one of those frameworks that we talked about. um, this is a great place to start, but I would pick a framework. If we're getting really complex enough that we're talking, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, they're going to want to, at a minimum, they're going to want to have the CIS controls in place. The better their cybersecurity is, the higher policy they're going to be able to get. Beyond that, it's working with an expert to kind of price it out and determine how much they
Yeah, to
want you.
figure out because my experience so far, which has mostly been with smaller businesses, is as long as the questions are asked or answered appropriately, they'll just say, well, here's the prices for the range, and you just pick one. So
Mhm.
the insurance company, which makes sense, is providing zero guidance. They're just saying
How
basically how much risk do you want to transfer to
how do
us?
I know?
Like,
Right. How do I know what range I need? Oh,
yeah,
that's for you to figure out. Exactly.
exactly. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question, which might be an easier one, is for websites and web hostings, is there a company that you would recommend over, say, WordPress or Bluehost, those kinds of things?
So I use both. Um, so what I use is I use Bluehost as my host, and they integrate very well with WordPress. So it's literally just I use Bluehost. WordPress is not my host, but it's my website creator. Um, I I will say that one's tougher in that the only one I would really say that I would recommend to avoid, not because they're a horrible business, but because as a professional experience working with them has been terrible, has is GoDaddy. Unfortunately, they've just been really difficult to get somebody moved off of their platform and to get higher level technical support. I am not trying to drag anybody through the mud. If they could get that stuff sorted out, um, I'm sure they have a great team. So at that point, I'm really looking at who is well established in the industry, who's big enough to have a cybersecurity team. How do I know that the SSL certs are solid? Um, but yeah, I use Bluehost personally. Their support has been great. They know what they're doing. Um, some of it, unfortunately, is I'm gonna trust you're doing what you say you're doing, and I'm gonna look to the community to hold you accountable in areas that I don't know.
For sure. Cool. That's what I use now. So I just wanted to double check.
Ginny and I know we're like 3 minutes over. Sorry.
I would never cut you off.
And that's okay. I'll cut myself off, especially since half the audience has had to move on to other meetings, I'm sure.
Well, thanks for being here, Charlie, and dropping the knowledge. I'll be sure that everyone who registered for this event has access to your slides and the recording.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I will send I'll send the slides over shortly. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining. I appreciate it.
thanks. Bye-bye.